Today we're going to be going over the Behringer WASP synthesizer. Before I jump into this, I just wanted to give a very quick plug. I got 64 patches for the Behringer WASP, so check that out in the link down below. What's interesting about this synth is that it's actually quite a quirky synth. And by that meaning, like, it's very basic in its layout, but it has some unusual features and controls. That's actually a lot of what gives it its characteristic sound, is its unusual features and controls. First, let's just go over the very basics. Your tuning knob here, I'm not going to touch this, but I'm going to tell you what this is. This is just a coarse tune for your synth. And really what you want to do is kind of tune it somewhere, like I have mine here, where when your oscillator 2 is down and you're just playing a single oscillator like this, that when this bend is around the middle, it's going to give you around like right on key 0 cents, you know, so your tuning is straight when this bend is in the middle on the key that you're playing, and then you can just leave that alone. Then the bend is like a fine tune. So we don't actually have a pitch bend on this synth. It doesn't take pitch bend controls. But this is technically like the pitch bend, but really, unless you're like a real knob twister guy, it's not really a good pitch bend like to use for performance, because it doesn't have a center point or any kind of spring action. So it's really more of a fine-tuned knob, and it goes up and down by like about half a semitone, a little more. Okay, and that's for both oscillators. So when you're tuning it, typically, you know, you just put down oscillator 2 level here, turn up oscillator 1 level, that's the mix level, and then you just play a note until you get it right about at 0. All right, so that's the bend. It's like a fine tune. Here, as I just went through, these are the mix. This is just oscillator 1 and 2 levels. Okay, that's all that is. We're just going to go down here real quick. The glide is just a portamento effect. Now, one kind of quirky thing about the WASP, especially the Behringer WASP, I'm not sure how the original architecture was, is that you're always going to hear a little bit of glide, like a very small amount going between notes. It's just a little bit of a tiny bend in the beginning, and it's kind of funny sounding, but it really gives it a lot of a unique flavor to all the sounds. And it's kind of a jumpy glide. It's, you know, it is how it is. It's very unique. And then when you play on the keys, just to keep in mind here, as I'm going through the kind of oscillator and keyboard section, you're always playing like, you set your keys like an octave down for middle C, and then it plays like a 37 key range. So it doesn't play the full keyboard range. So you're not going to get any MIDI activation on the up or on the bottom. And if you want higher notes or lower notes, you use your octaves right here to get those. And oscillator 1 and 2 levels, that's your mix right here. This is just oscillator octaves. So, all right, same down here, you turn up oscillator 2. All right. Very straightforward. Before I go into the oscillator 2 pitch, I'll just show you the wave shapes real quick. You know, oscillator 1 wave shape right here is we either got pulse or saw. These are the two basic ones. So if we go to saw, we have a basic sawtooth wave. But if we go to pulse, we get a square wave, and this is the pulse width exclusively for oscillator 1. All right, and so you can manually turn this for any patch, but you cannot get PWM, so you can't get a pulse width modulation. Now, the way you can get PWM on this synth is they've added this enhanced oscillator, ENH, and that is a PWM oscillator, basically. And it's got a sweep like about that speed. And that's fixed. There's no way to change that speed or that sound, but it does give you an additional thing to work with. which can be very useful when you're making different kinds of sounds. So that's kind of like your PWM wave, and it's kind of a built-in stable wave. And you get that on both. Now the difference between these two oscillators is that right here, when you go to pulse, you don't have a pulse width, so this pulse width doesn't do anything. It only affects oscillator 1, so this is always square. It's not a pulse. Your only pulse wave is up here. Here you have the same PWM wave though, identical to this one up here. Now what's tricky about this pitch is that you'll see how I have mine here, and it's kind of like at this almost 90 degree but a little bit higher angle, and you say, why is that? Well, this is actually the zero pitch. You would think, well, it's going to be in the center or something like that, but it's not. Your zero pitch is about right here, and you can kind of compare it and tune it with oscillator 1. So there's your zero pitch right there. All right, so keep that in mind when you're doing tuning. You can go a little bit up, but more down. So if you want to have a lot of semitones up, you want to put your octaves up, and you want to move this more down. And that gives you like your fifths and fourths and things like that you can't get by going up. When you go to here, this is your external. So if you have an external input, like another synth or another sound, you can put it external audio. And you can put this through the external and then you turn it up. Right now I don't have anything to plug in there, but that's just basically lets you use the filter and LFOs and envelopes and things like that to process an external signal. And this synthesizer is really built for processing external signals very well. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that it has like this hold function I'll go over, where you can basically loop very easily and have a lot of different like moving filter movement shapes and different things like that really go well through processing an external signal. This is your oscillator 1 and 2 out here, so just raw oscillators. You could plug one into the external and overdrive the filter and play around with that if you want to do that. It's just a little experiment you can try. Or sometimes there's also Y cables where you take two and they merge into one, then you put that in external, and you could overdrive the filter with both oscillators at once. So that's just would be a little trick that you could use by turning up this external. You could get an overdriven filter effect, and I've heard of people using that to great effect. Now your noise signal, all this does is just turns up the noise. It's just one type of noise, and there's no additional parameters to this noise. And when it comes to the control oscillator here, this is like your LFO. Control oscillator just basically means LFO, and these are your LFO shapes. So you have sine, upward saw, downward saw, square, noise, and random. And I'll go through them real quick. This is your LFO rate, and your LFO amount is two knobs. One is right here, this goes to the pitch, and one is right here, this goes to the filter. And the filter you can bring either inverted or regular. The pitch you can only bring up. And this affects both oscillators at once all the time. And you can get some kind of FM a little bit. You go into FM territory, and let's bring this up. Right there is a little bit of there's a little bit of FM territory. You can't move it. It's not going to be keyboard tracked or anything, but you get a stable sound. And it is good to have that FM territory here because it gives you more opportunity for different sounds. Like, and then when you put different shapes, got a different tone and so forth with the FM territory, and you can use it on the filter also. But yeah, that's the rate of the control oscillator, and you have your different shapes here. So you have your obvious sine, Now this is pretty useful. If you turn it all the way up, it goes about a fifth up and down. So when you kind of play with your tuning, you can get a nice fifth effect. Like, okay, somewhere about a fifth, something like that. You got to play with it. But that's check it on the tuner. This is a really good synth to use with the tuner, because then you really know what intervals and things you're getting into. The other two here are random and noise. We'll go to random first. Random is like sample and hold, like R2D2. Again, it's cool we have this audio rate, because you can kind of make it, give it a dirty sound. And when you have two oscillators. So that's kind of some examples of using the random, or you can just use it like an effect. And then the noise is a white noise audio rate modulation. And the white noise is basically actually bringing in like the noise signal. So this frequency does absolutely nothing. With the noise, it's always stable, just like this. But it gives you a noise modulation. And this is like really good with like a square wave. High pitch sound, for example. Now again, this does nothing. And you can bring in noise on top of that. So you can hear how we can start getting like different types of wind effects, or, you know, windy kind of sounds, or grimy sounds. Now keep in mind, anytime you use audio rate modulation, keep a tuner in handy, because you'll hear like the pitch can go up or down or whatever depending on how you use it, but you might have to change the bend to get it back aligned in tune when you use audio rate modulation, including with noise. Now there's the LFO, the control OSC, and that's your pitch destination. So let's just go to the filter real quick. Okay. Let's put this back on a regular so we can play with it right here with the amount, and then I'll show you that. So the filter is a regular 12 dB filter, always keyboard tracked, and not really self-resonating. So if you put all your oscillators down and you put your cutoff up, if you turn the volume way up, you could hear it, but it's not really like a Moog self-resonating like sine wave type of filter. It could work well with like a, and you can hear how it's always keyboard tracked at 100%, so it's right on key. Okay, but that's as high as the resonance goes. This is 12 dB, always keyboard tracked, and you have different filter types. So like you have your regular low pass filter. Now one thing about this filter too is that when you're playing with it, you're going to notice that it's kind of like always the resonance is always a little bit active. And you can never really de-resonate the filter totally. And that's just kind of a quirk of the synth. Just like the glide is a little bit always on the resonance. It's kind of a resonant filter. So you can really hear quite a bit of resonance right there, even with it all the way down. So just keep that in mind. That's how it sounds. And then you have your band pass, which is just a band pass filter. Okay. And then you have, let's go to the high real quick, which is just a high pass filter. And then you have a notch filter. Now, personally, I don't really use the notch filter on any patches, just with oscillators, because you're just hearing too much of the oscillator for me. It's like, there's no way to kill off the oscillator. or to like tune it, smoother. So this is a really good one to use automated with like an external signal or something like that, in my opinion. You can always play with it, but it's just like the opposite of a bandpass, and it's not that prominent. And you can use it, but you're always getting a fully open oscillator. All right, so let's just take it back to low pass. And then there's that. And then I told you I would show you the LFO goes to the filter. It's basically just the same as here, only you can go up or down. So let's go up. Keep in mind, if this is up, you're not going to hear anything up, so you have to bring this down. Or you can invert it. Cool thing about inverting it is like you can have this up, invert this down, and then when you bring this, you have like the two of them running against each other. That gives you a different effect than like, that's a more typical effect. And this is like you're inverting the shape against each other. So it's just an interesting thing to use that way. And it goes both ways, depending on how you want to utilize it with the filter. And here again, we can go through the different shapes. And you can get audio rate. Now this is really great, the audio rate filter modulation. Fuse it a little bit. You get these like real lo-fi sounds. And they're different at each shape. So you hear that's a lot of like see, like when you start playing around with things like that, you get a lot of this like really the tone of the Wasp. You get a lot of like the effect of what this synthesizer can sound like and have some unique sounds even with this basic arrangement. Is playing around with the inversions and putting them against each other and doing some audio rate and so forth. And you can use the noise on here too. This again sounds really good with the square wave, for example, like this. You can have them on both. So you hear how like when you start playing around with this, you just start getting a lot of very unique sounds from the synth that you would think is pretty basic. So that's all really related to that. Now, the envelopes is really the last part. And these envelopes are unique too. And they're quirky and they're unique. And that's what gives this synth a lot of its unique character as well. One, it's like it doesn't really have a proper ADSR in a way. So like let's do the amp envelope first because it's a little more straightforward. So the attack works mostly as you would expect. Now when it comes to this envelope on the amp, it has this analog effect where basically like it doesn't restart fresh every time. It's like once you go up, it has to wait for the decay to come back down to start from the bottom. So it can be good and it can be bad. Like it has its own sound, but sometimes when you want to have fast notes and you want to have like a series of notes, like you're making a brass sound or a pad or something, since this hasn't gone down yet, you're not going to get that slow attack because you're just starting like where this leaves off. The only way to really avoid that is like, and like play around with that. But this is always going to wait for this attack to go, decay, I'm sorry, to go down. So if it's all the way up, you're kind of stuck at a low attack, at an immediate attack, until you're waiting. You're always waiting for this to go down. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. So the last thing about the decay is that it's like the Moog, where in the mini Moog, the decay is the release. So like this is your decay and it's your release time both. Okay, so you kind of like, okay, there's like, I'm holding the notes, but if I just click them and I let them go, it's my release and my decay. Okay, so this is like for ADSR, you don't really get that. You get AD, like it's like ADR-S, like this is decay and release at the same time. And this is your sustain level. Now the thing about sustain level, something that you can feel, but it's not drawn into the board. There's a little click here and you'll see it says repeat. So that's just like regular. And it's interesting because it's almost like zeroes out about right here, really. But right there, you feel a resistance. What is the resistance about? Once you bypass the resistance, you just click it. It's not a smooth curve. You just click it. You feel a click, and this becomes a looping signal generator, like an LFO, sort of, but it's looping. I'm just holding the note. Okay, and the faster you bring the decay, the faster it loops. Okay, so it's kind of like a gated thing. It's sort of like a gate. And then when you bring this up, this loops too. So this whole thing loops and you get like an LFO that's like different shapes depending on how exactly you line it up. Right? So what's interesting about this is like you can play around with it and try to sync. There's no way to tempo sync it. So it's kind of like a little tricky to use as a gate unless you're doing like some kind of ambience or something, or like you really have it synced up well, or you resample it, because there's no way to sync it to a MIDI clock or like tempo. So you just kind of like stuck doing it by ear if you can. And you can get some pretty fast sounds too. Almost like a light FM. So again, like other synths don't have this. So this is where you're getting into these like unique characteristics of the Wasp. Right? So like what other synth, like a basic synth, are you going to find that kind of looping thing? Right? So very interesting how that works. And then if you put hold, is basically like just hold a note for you. It holds your gate open, and you can change the note on the MIDI, but it holds your gate. This is good for like drones, and also for if you're just using external signal input, you can turn your oscillators down and you can turn your hold on, and this opens the gate. And then you can just you turn these off so you don't hear them. Or you know, you're always going to hear it a tiny bit, is just how it is, but not really compared to like if you have a loud external signal, you won't even hear it. But you hold this open, and then you can apply this to whatever external signal you have, like or you can use it as a drone if you're if you want to make some kind of drones or something. So now I'm just changing the notes on my MIDI keyboard. So that's what the hold does. It just holds the gate open. That's what the loop does. That's how it works. Okay. And the last part right here is this filter envelope. So the kind of the basic setting for this envelope is like sustain all the way up, attack all the way down, decay somewhere right here, then you get a pretty open. Just get your basic envelope. And then here on the filter, what's interesting is like you get a lot of the same effect. The attack and decay works almost the same. But one thing about your attack, okay, is a little different than right here. Here the attack goes up, and as soon as you let it go, it starts going down with the decay. And then, you know, we went over that. Here the attack is different because actually where you set it, this is a set time attack. Meaning like even when you let go of the key, it's not actually going to immediately start going down with the decay. It is a time, like in seconds, that this will go up no matter whether you let go of the key or you press another key or what. Once it starts, it's not going to stop. And it's an attack time, meaning like, okay, I have this. Even if I have my decay all the way down, you can hear that. It doesn't go down immediately like this one did when the decay is all the way down. It is a time, and the longer it is, the more notes you press, and it's going to keep going up until it's finished. That's going to go immediately with the decay. Okay, that's the unique thing about the attack there. And you just have to work that into your sounds. It can either be annoying, if you're trying to use a very typical Moog sound or something with the attack times, but this is not a Moog. This is a unique synth, and it's got a unique sound, and this can be used to create unique characteristics. You know, it's just something that, like, if you combine this and you put like a right? I'm just pressing a few notes, and you can see what I'm talking about. How like you combine these, and that's how you get these unique sounds that you can get from the Wasp. One thing to be careful about though is, like, again, none of this can be synced to a MIDI clock. So a lot of times it's useful in very fast repetitions or like these kind of things that I was doing, but there's no way to time it. So like, okay, this goes up every 4 bars unless you do it by ear. And that can be tricky because there's no way to time when it starts. So you just have to play around with that, or even resample it or something like that. And keep in mind, all these effects can be used on an external signal. So this is, again, a really great external signal processor. That's how the attack works on the filter. And the decay just works just like identical to here. It's a decay / release. Okay. And here, this is, again, a little different. You remember that we went over how this is sustain, this is repeat. This is normally always here for any patch, okay, right above that click. And this gives you just an attack, decay, release function, and that's it. This is what you're always using. There is no sustain. The sustain is right here, and balancing that out. There is no sustain level on the filter envelope at all. Okay, what this does is totally different. What this does is gives you a delay time. If you go after this click, it gives you a delay time before the envelope starts, which is like this. Again, it's just this like a millisecond time delay. But this is a unique thing of the Wasp. This is like how the Wasp gets a lot of its unique characteristics, is like, you know, if you have a patch and you want that kind of, you can get that kind of effect. You can't get it in other synths. It just sounds so retro and like trippy and weird. And that's really what this synth is. is it's kind of a trippy, weird synth. It's not really meant to be like a Moog or something like that. It just got all these strange little quirks and functions, and it acts like it acts. And this repeat works the exact same way once you go past the click as up here. So like this becomes like a variable shape LFO. It's like an inverted saw, regular saw, sine. So you get these kind of, and then you can combine it with this. So like I can have a slow one here, and then a fast square wave here. It just sounds like really weird and trippy, and that's the synth. That's what it does, you know. This is just your output volume and your headphone volume. I usually just set it and forget it, unless you have some specific need to change it or something like that. But there you go. So I hope you enjoyed that little overview and tutorial of the synth. You know, if you like it, please like and subscribe. Again, check out the patches for the synth that I have down below in the description. And I appreciate your time. Have a great day.